Hey everybody, John Smalley here again today. I've got my good friends, Dr. Stephen Thoenes with Aculeo. I'll let you guys learn a little bit more about him here in a second. One of the leading worldwide experts in bees and wasps and stinging experts, excuse me. One of the few people I know that has a PhD in that. So excited to have the conversation with you today. Most of you guys know this, but I'm on a mission right now. I'm driving
52 weeks.
52 conversations. Hopefully it gets done in a little bit less than 52 weeks. But Steve, whether it's academia, whether it's business, whether it's pest controllers, whether it's anybody in the industry who cares enough to talk about what I believe is the need for innovation and sustainable pest control, I just want to have a lot of conversations. You know, my conversations to date have largely been about birds. Today, you're the bee expert.
Start out with your strength.
Yeah, the wasp expert. But there's a lot of connections, and you and I know that. You know, I came across your company a while back and was just really blown away with a product that you have called the Buzzbox that was able to solve generational problems in a way that didn't wipe out the entire hive. And to me, it just was check the box. It's directly in line with what I'm trying to do at Symterra. So I've got Sean here today. Sean's going to help us get through these conversations and ask a couple questions. But I'm really looking forward to having the conversation, you know, with you today and picking your brain and being able to share with our listeners your thoughts and your ideas, not just about where pest control is at and why it's there, but where you think it could go going forward. So you ready to start?
Yeah.
Cool. So for the folks who don't know you, give a little bit of a quick bio on yourself and your education and your background and, you know, what you do and who you are.
Let's see. My mom and dad were beekeepers, so I've spent most of my life with fingers and eyes inside beehives. I did my first bee removal from a building 55 years ago.
Okay.
And yes, I was 10 at that time.
It's like child abuse in today's world. You know?
One of the interesting things is the way the whole industry has changed. Is we used to do bee removals and keep the bees alive and use them in our hives and give honey to the person who gave us, you know, access to the bees. And nowadays we do bee services and we charge a whole bunch of money for it. So it's an incredible way that it has turned into a big part of business.
Yeah,
just all over.
So you grew up as a kid doing it, but then you ended up going to school for it.
Right. So I have a master's and PhD in entomology, couple degrees from NAU in chemistry and biology. And my specialty is studying the swarming behavior of honeybees, and in particular all the different odors and smells that control all the behaviors with bees.
Okay, so be honest, when you're in your graduation class, is it you and like two other people? there's no way that class is that big, you know? How do you get that locked in to, you know, not just a bee, but a particular behavior from that bee?
And one of the weird things about science these days is I was actually studying whole organisms, live bees. And most of the entomologists are studying like a little chemical process within the animal that they're doing. And so it's really a huge difference between the ivory tower type of research and the practical research that people do.
Cool. And you now have Aculeo. You want to talk a little bit about what Aculeo is?
So Aculeo is a company that specializes in creating products that are odor driven that control bees' behaviors, so that we can make lures, we can make different controls and control bees' behavior using harmless to people chemicals. I mean, the one that we use most smells just like lemon pledge, has the major chemical components as lemon pledge. So it's odors that we're really, really familiar with, and we just utilize those in a biological sense and towards a goal, and we can control what honeybees do.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have a very similar approach at Symterra around wanting to control the bird's behavior without negatively, in fact, impacting the bird or the environment that the bird lives in.
Right.
You know, I've said this before on past episodes, but there's a joke that I'm sure you've heard before, but in the pest control industry, we talk about humans are actually the world's biggest pest. You know, we've created so many of these problems, whether it's a coffee shop that has syrups everywhere, so there's bees looking for food, and of course stinging in that scenario, or birds that are overpopulated and taking over a cafe and creating health issues.
Right.
But we also live in 2025, and I know we're going to talk about that here in a second. So, Sean, I'll kick it over to you. But it feels like we created these problems, and we live in a day and an age where there's enough information out there now that we can also solve them.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, first, John, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
It's an honor to kind of facilitate this conversation. I have 17 days straight of Wordle completion, so that's my.
That's 17
That's
more
about
days.
it.
So, yeah.
But first, let's talk about why the industry. Do we believe it could be further along? And given that the technology and our knowledge is available today, why do you think the pest control industry has been so slow to adopt sustainable, non-lethal solutions? I mean, do you believe it's a lack of innovation, a lack of will, or something else completely different?
You go first.
So, bird control and bee control are both specialties within the pest control industry. And so our employees are trained completely different than the general pest type of employee. And I think one of the biggest factors is the company owners don't want to spend the money to train their people. Mm-hmm. And the employees that have been there for a long time, they're used to their routine. And they want to walk up to the front door. They want to turn left. They want to spray all the baseboards with whatever's in their sprayer, and do it as fast as they can, and so they can get through their list. And so it requires a whole different level of training and education and just equipment to do the specialties. And so if you're talking about using non-chemical controls, then a lot of those require at least that the owner of the company get behind it. If they're not willing to, if they just want to have their same old thing that they've done for the past, 1,000 customers, then it's not going to change. So it takes education of the employees and starting with education and investment by the owners. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see the investment piece being a big deal there. They're making good margins. Pest control companies are. I own pest control companies off of very, very traditional solutions. And because things have always been done the way that they've always been done, the consumer, up until recently, hasn't really put a lot of pressure back on the industry to do things different. I think it's companies like Aculeo. I think it's companies like Symterra that are now saying, hey, look, we're using science and we can do it differently. That's going to change that. But quite frankly, a lot of these guys have been doing what they've been doing for the last 50, 60, 70 years.
And they say, why rock the boat?
That's it. I've heard that. You have too.
Yeah.
Hey, no, just go kill him.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to kill him. And honestly, it's going to take a little bit of a trailblazer and a rebel. You've been doing this since you were 10. I could barely pass 7th grade science with a C. I never thought. I came out of healthcare originally. I cared about public health. And then I started associating all the dangers with public health with with birds in my scenario.
Right.
And then I started asking, like, why? And people got annoyed. Just shut up, dude, and go with it. This is the way it works. It's profitable. The consumer will pay for it. And I just said, but what if you did this? What if you did that? Well, that would require A, B, C, and D. That would require not only a financial investment, but for us to shift the paradigm on the way that we look at the problem and who's responsible for the problem. I had a recent conversation with the U of A where they acknowledged even they didn't put pressure on pest control companies for handling problems with the solutions that they did up until recently, simply because there wasn't a better option out there.
I was in a seminar recently where one of the speakers from the U of A got up and talked about integrated pest management, where it requires a whole bunch of sampling and you have to know what's going on in the environment. And as soon as she got up there and started talking, you can look around and everybody's eyes glazed over. I mean, they have to sit there for their credit hours, but they weren't listening to what she had to say at all.
Yeah.
And so that the information is there on how to accomplish it, but you have to get the people to move in that direction. And the fact that people continue to want just general pest control the way that their grandfather had it. The chemicals might have changed, but it's just what they have in their brain is what it actually is.
Yeah, great. Today we're seeing our customers and people in general. The customers are ready, so why aren't the companies? Why are we seeing a growing number of clients asking, pest control companies and other companies to be more environmentally responsible? If they're willing to pay more for it, why do you believe the industry is lagging behind its own customers' wishes?
I'll go with this one.
Okay.
We're one of the more expensive options. I think Aculeo's
Is as well.
is as well. I think it's just a lack of understanding and knowledge. I think it's a different way to position your sales team to go out there and actually create more margin. We talk about it a lot at Symterra, but there's never been a better time to do good and make money than right now, right? But it does take a change of thought with regards to how you provide a solution to the client. What I see as the opportunity is I believe in my industry that the TAM, total available market for birds, is about $4 billion a year. I think it could go to 8 to 12 billion a year if we
You're
started
talking
using
internationally or in the United States?
internationally. So I believe it could go to 8 to 12 billion a year just in bird control if we opened up these solutions. You get your IBMs, your Meta, your Microsofts, your Lockheed Martins, your big corporate companies that have to report back to shareholders and say, look, we have to be conscious about the impact we have on the environment. They are now more so than ever through ESG conversations or focuses saying we have to come back with a solution that is effective but does not leave a lasting imprint on the environment. And I think if customers, I think customers, not just the commercial customers, the big businesses, but people like myself, I will pay more money to have you use less pesticide and get me the same or better outcome all day long. I do not pay you to put pesticide down. I do not pay you to kill the bird. I pay you to get rid of my problem and not make me feel like a jerk about the way that we left our ongoing footprint on that animal or that opportunity. So I do think that customers are starting to realize that the consumer wants it bad enough that they will actually pay more and create more margin. The one other thing I'll say, and I'll turn it over to you, a lot of our solutions, and I've seen yours as well, they're more permanent. They require less ongoing maintenance, call it, right? Because you're convincing the bee to just leave that area alone. I'm convincing the bird to eventually leave that area alone. And sometimes that's a good thing. If you can convince the pest control company, go ahead and do that because there's actually less labor associated with managing this, which you're still billing the customer for. Great. But I think some pest control companies look at it as, well, there goes my management fee. There goes my ability to charge perpetually over and over. And I don't think that's the case, but I do think you have to be able to teach the industry to look at it differently.
In the instance with honeybees is they do almost all their communication by sense of smell. So you don't have to kill them. All you have to do is control what they're perceiving with their environment, with their sensory organs, so that we can change their behavior by introducing different odors into their environment. And one of the requirements from the customer that I had for this big, huge industrial customer was they said, we want to control the honeybees at our locations, but we don't want to kill the hive that's out causing the problems. And so with some background knowledge and all the different things, I came up with the Buzzbox, which will control all the bees that find a certain location, but it doesn't control and kill the nest of where the bees came from. For example, throughout the eastern part of Phoenix, we protect all the Dutch Bros coffees, and they absolutely love it. We have an interview that's available online where the people are going, we used to spend a lot of time every day dealing with bee problems and bee issues and trying to figure it out. And we got a hold of Dr. Steve. He put up buzz boxes, and now we don't worry about bees at all. If there's anything that happens, he comes in and corrects the system, and within a day or so, they don't have any bees again. So the bees are going to be there in the environment, causing problems in certain instances, but we can control that now.
When you keep the bee in the environment that they're supposed to be in, they serve that purpose that nature wants them to serve. When you remove the bee completely from the environment, there is unintended consequences. And it's the same thing with birds. We had a rancher on one of my episodes, and he's in Arizona. He was running out of water. So, of course, what do people do in Arizona? They harvest water, right? And where does that water come from? The roofs. And he had so many birds that the water was unusable.
Contaminated.
And so he said, I would gladly pay for this because it's not just I don't want those birds there. I need to be able to use that water. And he said, the best thing is I still hear the birds. They're just in the trees.